Hello guys, how are you? As you can see, here we have an airborne warning and control system. Today, we are going to fly in it. We are going to go on a mission. This is absolute madness. We are going to learn in this video how these types of planes work because they are really some of the most important that an army can have. And I'm going to try to tell you everything I can and everything that can be told because there are things that are more or less confidential. Yes, NATO has invited me to experience a mission from the inside. The goal was to practice for real combat between different fighters, and the controllers inside the airborne warning and control system would direct those pilots to fictitiously shoot down hypothetical enemies. Stay with me to understand how missions work in NATO's most important aircraft. Contrary to what is often believed, nowadays the most important thing is not to have the most maneuverable fighter. That's just one factor among many. More crucial are the missiles the aircraft can carry. Current missiles can be fired from tens of kilometers away, long before the enemy has been sighted. And considering that missiles have more maneuverability than any aircraft, we could say that in combat, the first to fire will have a huge advantage over the other. For this reason, the radars of fighter jets are one of the priorities for improvement in any current project to detect the enemy earlier. But logically, the larger the radar, the greater its range will be. The problem is that fighter planes must carry the radar in their nose, and therefore, its size is very limited. This is where early warning and airborne control aircraft come in, or in English, airborne warning and control system, which are responsible for detecting enemies and also controlling the airspace of military aircraft. In this category, we have aircraft such as the Russian Beriev A-50, the American C-2 for deployment on aircraft carriers, the Russian Kamov K-31 also for aircraft carrier deployment, and of course the Boeing E-3 Sentry known as Airborne Warning and Control System. Its radar allows it to have a range of more than 600 kilometers for high-flying aircraft and between 300 and 400 kilometers for low-flying aircraft. This is much more than the radar of any airport, because the curvature of the Earth prevents electromagnetic waves from cleanly reaching objects from a certain distance. And this is where a flying radar will have much more range. Although it is true that radars are not strictly limited by the horizon line, their waves can bounce off the atmosphere, allowing the signal to reach beyond the horizon. In fact, there are radars designed for very long distances, but this is not the norm. That's why the airborne warning and control system allows for that extra range whenever and wherever it's needed. People often think that this plane only has the radar, but in reality it is full of antennas to detect all kinds of signals. This aircraft is a modification of a Boeing 707, the first American commercial jet engine plane developed in the 50s. With the Boeing 707 already operating in the 60s, the United States Air Force began looking for a replacement for the Lockheed E-121, the warning and control plane that the United States Army was using at that time. To which Boeing responded with the proposal of the AWACS. The first model was delivered in the year 1977. The cabin remains unchanged from the Boeing 707 except for some screen improvements. The structure of the plane is the same as the Boeing 700-300, and the most striking feature of the aircraft, of course, is its 9-meter diameter and 1/8 high antenna a person can practically stand inside. People actually go inside for maintenance, so I got to chat with the pilot. The antenna is designed not to generate weight on the plane at cruising speed. That is, it generates enough lift to cancel its own weight. Due to its design, the aircraft is limited to a maximum Mach number of 0.76. Is this achievable with the airborne warning and control system? Because if not, shock waves can start to be generated on the inner part of the antenna support. Because if you notice, it's really like a nozzle where the air is going to accelerate in between. And those shock waves, if generated, would aggressively impact the vertical stabilizer, and obviously problems could arise. The aircraft was capable of in-flight refueling, but I did not have the opportunity to experience it. Initially we were going to do it, but we were told it was cancelled due to weather conditions. When do they do it? The plane is experiencing a lot of turbulence. And this is because the pilot, the one from the airborne warning and control system, is constantly giving more power to the engine, reducing power to try to hook up the hose from the plane above. The airborne warning and control system is clearly different from other planes like fighters due to its significant inertia. This means that when they give it more throttle, until the plane starts to respond and begins to accelerate. We were told that it takes about 7 seconds, which is a lot. In-flight refueling is highly complex, which is why things get shaky whenever it's attempted. Look, in this video you can see an incident that occurred during a refueling of an airborne warning and control system. Everyone inside was thrown around during the impact, causing minor injuries, but fortunately, nothing serious occurred in the video. The great inertia of the plane when responding to the engines is mostly due to it being such a large plane. But in particular also because of the antenna, which generates a lot of drag, therefore it will take longer to accelerate. But the pilot also told us that this is an advantage when landing, as the plane brakes on its own. This aircraft can fly for about 8 hours without in-flight refueling. But the most intriguing aspect of this plane is discovered within. Let's see what all its crew members do so you understand why this plane is one of the most important an army can have. The crew consists of 2 groups, the flight deck, responsible for flying the plane, and the mission crew responsible for the mission. Also in this way, we have them arranged from front to back of the plane, so we are going to go through the plane from front to back, and we are going to explain what each person does. To guide you, I will be showing on this scheme where we are at all times, of the plane seen from above. First of all, as in all planes, we have the captain seated on the left and a co-pilot seated on the right. Being such an old plane, it also carries a navigator and an engineer. The latter is in charge of checking the engine parameters. The navigator is no longer necessary, but the flight engineer is still required. But watch out, because here is the information for the flight engineer. In fact, the flight engineer is here. He is American. He mentioned that this aircraft type still employs a flight engineer since overhauling the entire system isn't cost effective. For the analog systems to pass the information to a computer, it would cost a lot of money. So they simply continue to use a flight engineer who, in the end, mostly reads the engine information. Well, all the other crew members are inside the mission crew. First, we have 2 systems and communications technicians. These ones were covered with curtains, but like in all the others, they had a chair and computer. Well, these are in charge of solving any problem that may arise with the communications and systems of the plane. Then, moving back, we come across the first row where we have the surveillance operators. There are 3 of these. The airborne warning and control system is not only designed to detect aircraft, but it can also detect targets on land and targets at sea. So when a maritime mission is being carried out, one operator will be in charge of monitoring what is being detected at sea, and the other what is being detected in the air. In case the mission does not have sea, both will divide the air, a piece of the area for each one. And the third operator will be in charge of operating the Link 16? This is the data link that NATO uses to communicate between aircraft without the need to speak. This relays all aircraft data, velocity, elevation, remaining fuel, firing status, and pursuit status. And this is done so that the controllers can then assign tasks to the planes, knowing whether they will be able to carry them out or not. If a plane is out of fuel, you won't ask it to intercept an enemy plane as it won't be able to. Now we move on to the next area where we have the weapons team, which will be in charge. The air traffic controllers of the fighter planes do exactly the same job as a civilian air traffic controller, but with a slight difference. Civilian controllers are responsible for separating aircraft to ensure there is space between them. The members of the weapons team, known in Spanish as interception controllers, are responsible for bringing the aircraft together. Because what they do is guide your fighter plane towards the enemy fighter plane. So, knowing the trajectory that the enemy aircraft is taking, or if there are civilian planes in the way, instructions will be given to the fighter to avoid the civilian planes and find the enemy. Of the 6 people who make up the weapons team, one of them will be responsible for all the others, and he is called the fighter allocator. Next, we move on to the tactical directors, who, depending on the mission, it may be that only 1 goes or 2 go. They report to the operations center upon seeing something relevant. Imagine they spot a bomber formation flying towards a destination. The people in charge of notifying the ground would be them. In general, they are responsible for the entire mission. In the next row, we have the surveillance controller and the passive controller. The first one is responsible for converting the criteria that have been established to identify aircraft into parameters that the plane's automatic identification system can work with. For example, if a mission is looking for enemy bombers, the radar parameters will be set to search for large planes, as bombers are generally large planes. This is a highly simplified example for understanding. And the passive controller is responsible for noticing if there is any system that is tracking the aircraft. The plane uses sensors located on its sides, rear, and front to accomplish this. However, be cautious, as it not only detects if something is sensing them, but also identifies what exactly is detecting them. With a vast database and the operator's expertise, they are able to know based on the wave that is reaching them whether what is detecting them is a ground radar, a ship radar, or an airplane radar, and to identify the specific airplane solely by analyzing the properties of the received wave. And once they know which airplane is detecting them, will one decision or another be made. It's not the same to be detected by a MiG-21 as it is by a Sukhoi 35, since the capabilities of these two planes are very different. That information would be passed from the passive controller to the tactical director, who then decides what to do. For instance, if an enemy Sukhoi 27 is tracking them, the tactical director will analyze how dangerous it is to stay in the area and consider how important the mission they are on is. If something crucial is underway, it's worth persisting without fleeing, despite the risk of a Sukhoi 27 firing a missile. In case what is detecting them is a ground system, its position can be triangulated by receiving signals at different periods of time. Once you know that what is trying to detect you is a ground system, you'll know that its position is not going to change, and therefore it can be triangulated, and in that way know where it is. On a personal note, I asked the passive controller of my flight what he would least like to be tracked by while he was on the plane. His answer was clearly a fighter jet, because while you can escape from a surface-to-air missile or a ship, escaping from a fighter jet is more difficult. Especially considering that this aircraft, the Airborne Warning and Control System, only has one air defense, time. Having such a large radar, it is aware if any enemy aircraft is approaching and could maintain a safety margin with it. If a missile was fired, it would be quickly detected and the plane would simply avoid it. It has no chaff, flares, or anything at all. Finally, there's the radar technician, responsible for the radar. Check that all vital parameters are correct, for example, that it does not have overheating, that the power is adequate, etc. So, in general terms, what the Airborne Warning and Control System does is detect planes, ships, or whatever is being searched for. Once that is found, the information is passed to a NATO operations center on the ground, where a decision is made about what to do. That decision is relayed to the WAX and through the weapon steam. The WAX controllers will organize the fighters to do whatever is pertinent with respect to the target that has been detected. At the back of the plane, there's space to store suitcases. In the event that the plane landed at a different airport from departure and an overnight stay or multi-day mission was required. And continuing further back, towards the end of the plane, there are seats to carry people who are not going to work on the mission, as was my case, and the people who came with me. On the right, there's a kitchen with a stove, fridges, and coffee makers for people to eat. It's interesting because throughout the flight, you could see how people would get up to get a coffee, heat up food, etc. The atmosphere is incredible. Remember that the shortest missions last 7-8 hours, but with refueling, they can be extended indefinitely. I heard there have been missions lasting over 20 hours, and if anyone asks, yes, it's true. The plane had a bathroom at the rear and even stretchers for passengers who wanted to lie down. For long missions, rest is necessary. The mission of that day consisted of leaving from the German base of Geiler-Kitchen, heading south, passing over the Alps, Venice, and until we were orbiting over Italy. At this moment, and while we were spinning non-stop, the exercise would begin. In this exercise, fighter planes from different alliance countries were going to fight against each other. I can't recall all the participating countries, but there were Mirage, 2000 Eurofighters F-16S, and check this out. That smile of mine is because he told me that what he was pointing at on the screen was an F-35. As shown in the animation, screen recording was not possible during the exercise, but it roughly represents what was observed. These here were planes, and if you clicked on them, information about the plane would unfold. Within the weapons team, some were in charge of directing those from one side and others those from the other. They were distinguished on the map by red color and blue color. One team was the attacker, the other the defender. The attackers had to neutralize the enemies and eliminate a ground target, which I believe was a hypothetical anti-aircraft defense battery. When a plane was fictitiously shot down, it would change the color of its letters, and this one had to immediately leave the combat zone to remain flying in a delimited strip. It was incredible to see two planes, one from each side, come together and suddenly one would turn yellow. That's because it had been shot down. This plane would then head towards the area designated for downed planes. And at a certain point, an area was enabled in which, when passing over it, all the downed planes would come back to life. It was literally like watching or even playing a video game. The goal of trainings like this is not to determine a winner, but for all the pilots to train and test themselves. That's why they revive planes so they can train longer. Once the exercise was over, we turned back to Germany, back the same route, but in the meantime we did a cabin depressurization drill. That's why all of a sudden people took out their masks and put them on quickly. In the end, it's best to be prepared for these emergencies, and just in case one day we have to live through them. And considering that this plane is a very tempting target for the enemy, they also usually practice smoke emergencies in the cabin and cabin fires. The atmosphere inside the plane is incredible. Of the 17 or 19 people who were on my flight, nationalities almost didn't repeat. There were people from Spain, Greece, Turkey, Germany, the United States, really many countries, and that makes the experience much more enriching. I had the pleasure of meeting two Spaniards who in fact have collaborated with the information part of this video. Here they are with me. Jorge is an intruder from the Astronautical Escape channel, Rodrigo is a passive controller, and Victor is a surveillance controller. The experience I had on the plane was 1,000 times better, simply because they were there, since they were explaining everything to me in our mother tongue. Many thanks to NATO really for inviting me to such an incredible experience, to see how the fighters transmit information with the controllers of the AWACS, etc. I had no idea there was so much to it. See you soon with the next video. For those who contribute to this channel through Patreon or YouTube's collaborators section, I have left a scheme inside the AWACS. So you can download it and you can take a look at all the functions where each one is, etc. Thank you very much and see you in the next one.